The Seven Kings of Rome. The legendary rulers of Rome go way back before the foundation of Rome itself. Around 1100 BCE, Rome's ancestors were involved in a little bit of trouble. The Trojan War. During this time, the Greeks, who lived here, were invading the Trojans, who lived here, on what is modern-day Turkey. The war that started had gone on for 10 long years, 10 years of epic rivalries, intense battles, and tragic deaths. For more on these stories, check out the Iliad. By now, most of the men on both sides were sick of the bloodshed and loss, and wanted this war to come to an end. You may have heard of one of the most famous Greeks, Odysseus. He has his own side story after the war. As he recalls in that book, during the last year of the war, Odysseus comes up with a cunning plan to ensure the Greek victory. This is where the horse comes in. The Trojan horse was a giant wooden statue of a horse. The Greeks and the gods tricked the Trojans into believing that they had fled back to Greece, and that the Trojans should bring the statue into their walled city. Inside the statue, however, the Greeks were secretly hiding. When all the Trojans, thinking they had won the war, went to sleep, the Greeks snuck out of the horse and began killing and burning everything they saw. This hectic scene is where our protagonist, Aeneas, takes the stage in his own book, the Aeneid. He wakes during the flames and is warned to get out of the city while he still can, where Troy is doomed to destruction. He and his wife, Creusa, take their son in hand and begin fleeing, but Aeneas' father is so old he cannot run, so Aeneas takes him on his shoulders. Aeneas manages to escape, but when he turns around outside the walls, he realizes that Creusa had gotten lost behind them and had died in the chaos. With little time to mourn, he becomes the leader of everyone who managed to escape Troy, and sails them far away to a foreign city, Carthage. There, Aeneas meets Carthage's wise and beautiful queen, Dido. Having not had a wife for a few months, Aeneas falls in love with Dido quickly, and she returns his feelings. Unfortunately for our hero, the gods have other plans for him. His mom, who so happens to be the goddess Venus, making our Aeneas not just any sad guy, but a sad demigod, tells him he has to leave to found a kingdom in Italy. Aeneas leaves and breaks Dido's heart, which hopefully will have no bad consequences. After leaving Carthage, Aeneas arrives in Lavinium in Italy. He fights many of the Italian natives who are not all sure about this random demi-guy ruling over them. To convince them, he marries their princess, Lavinia, whom the kingdom is named after. Aeneas rules in Lavinium for 3 happy years, when his son, now grown up himself, Ascanius, moves out and decides it's time for him to start his own kingdom, which he calls Alba Longa. He rules there for 30 years. Then a bunch of no-names rule the city for another 303 years until we get to King Proca. When Proca died, his oldest son, Numitor, and youngest son, Amulius, begin fighting for the throne. Amulius usurps the throne from his brother and forces him to flee the land. Amulius even went so far as killing Numitor's sons to ensure that they wouldn't try to avenge him. Numitor also had a daughter, though, named Rhea Silvia. Instead of killing her, Amulius made her a Vestal Virgin. Vestal Virgins were priestesses of the goddess Vesta, and were the highest honored women in Roman society. Numitor cleverly made Rhea a Vestal Virgin with the pretext of honoring her, but his real motives were to ensure that Numitor's familial line would end with Rhea Silvia. However, fate had other plans in store. Rhea, to everyone's shock, became pregnant. The Vestal Virgins were forbidden from having sex, and this was enforced by threat of death by burying alive. Rhea, however, said that she had not lain with a mortal man, but had been raped by the god of war himself, Mars. Rhea gave birth to 2 twin boys, Romulus and Remus. Despite their godly father, Rhea was still thrown in prison for breaking her vows. Numitor, obsessed with keeping his bloody throne, ordered that the 2 babies be drowned in the Tiber River. But by the gods' will, the Tiber was overflowing, so the men who were hired to drown the boys couldn't get to the mouth of the river, and left them to die, exposed in the water, left adrift in their cradle. Instead, the babies washed ashore in the countryside far away from the palace. There, the babies did what they do best, began to cry. The babies then found help from an unexpected source. A recently pregnant she-wolf, or lupa in Latin, came to the Tiber for water when, attracted by their cries, she found the boys by the bank. As the sons of Mars, the boys had a special connection to her, as the wolf was an animal sacred to the god of war. She let the babies nurse from her own milk and kindly looked after them, licking them like her own young. This is how an amazed shepherd who was passing by found the boys. This shepherd's name was Faustulus. He took these special twins, and with his wife Laurentia raised them as their own sons. As they grew up, they took after both their fathers. They tended sheep and learned to hunt. And when a gang of thieves broke out, creating havoc among the shepherds by stealing all the livestock, Romulus and Remus managed to steal not only the animals back from right under their noses, but the rest of their plunder as well. The two redistributed the loot among their fellow shepherds, and because of the young men's courage and strength, the two became extremely well liked in their community. This, of course, did not make the thieves very happy, and so they devised a plan to enact revenge. In Alba Longa, there was a festival called the Lupercalia. This festival was a huge celebration where young men would be chosen, called Luperci, to run around the city having fun playing sports and partying, all while in the nude. Romulus and Remus, as the jocks of their time, were of course taking part and having fun, when the thieves surrounded and ambushed them. Romulus managed to hold off their captors, but Remus was taken prisoner. The thieves had come up with a devious plot. They accused Romulus and Remus of the crimes that they themselves had been committing. They'd gathered men to go in and plunder the lands now ruled by Numitor, who, remember, is Rhea's dad, making him, though they had no idea, Romulus and Remus's grandpa. But now, the thieves gave up Remus to Numitor and blamed him for all their crimes. Romulus, worried for his brother, ran to their father Faustulus to tell him what had happened, and that Remus was going to be judged by Numitor for pillaging his land. Faustulus had for a long time suspected the truth. He had known that Amulius called for his two twin grandnephews to die in the Tiber at the same time that he had found the babies. So for their protection, he had not told anyone that he had actually adopted them, nor that their biological grandfather was Numitor. Now, though, he told the whole story to Romulus in hopes that he could inform Numitor in time to save Remus. After hearing this, Romulus rushes to Numitor before Remus can be punished and explains everything to Numitor. As Romulus' story unfolds, Numitor begins to remember the stories of his daughter Rhea and the two twins whom she had given birth to. Comparing the ages of the boys with how long ago Rhea had given birth, and sufficiently impressed that their strength, courage, and looks could only come from his own line along with the blood of a god, he believes them and sets Remus free. Immediately after the celebration, the young men who were once happy as shepherds now turned their royal crowns to conquest. Along with their grandfather's army, they planned a surprise attack on their usurper granduncle Amulius, who was still ruling Alba Longa, blissfully unaware that he was missing his family reunion. The twins successfully avenged their mother and uncles by surrounding the false king and killing Amulius. Thus, Romulus and Remus came out of the palace with their grandfather and saluted Numitor as the true king of Alba Longa. The people of Alba Longa, once they heard of Amulius' treacherous conduct from the two most popular guys in town, no one had a problem crowning Numitor. Now that their family wrongs were set to right, the twins, now men, went back to the countryside by the Tiber where they had grown. Many people, both Alban and Latin, had begun living in this area along with shepherds. The men wished to create a city that would grow greater than either Alba Longa or Lavinium. But before this great thing could be done, they first had to settle one little issue. Who would be in charge? That familial curse that had plagued their grandfather and granduncle sprang up again. Ambition. Both Romulus and Remus wanted to rule the city. With what happened in the past, both men knew enough to respect the rule of the eldest, but in this case, no one knew which of the boys was born first, and therefore, at least in their minds, who was right to rule. Except, of course, their father. The two men turned to one of the ways that mortals communicated with gods in ancient times, augury. This was a practice where a holy man would look into the sky and take note of the type, number, and location of the birds in the sky. He would then use this information to decipher the god's will. In this case, Romulus and Remus themselves, being the sons of Mars, would receive their father's message on who would rule the new city, and who it would be named after. The two stood on different hills in the area. Romulus chose the Palatine Hill, and Remus chose the Aventine. Remus looks in the sky and celebrates when he sees 6 vultures. He lets his friends and followers know that he was the first to see the divine message from his father, that he was to rule. Just as Remus announces that, Romulus sees vultures as well, but 12 appear above his hill. Romulus and his followers then claim that Mars has actually proclaimed him the ruler because he saw more birds. While these tensions among the two were boiling, Romulus took action and began building the wall around the Palatine for his new city. This infuriates Remus, who jumps over the wall and is killed by Romulus, who says, "So it shall be henceforth with everyone who leaps over my walls." This murder is the foundation of the city, now named after its ruler, Rome, in 753 BCE.